I'm here. I'm just turning the camera off. But
Okay, no problem. Okay, so share screen. Ah, good. Geraldine just joined us. Great. So here we go. Share. So we stopped last week at, sorry about this, if
these
any
are
of you
very
are
little
missing.
pictures.
Um, 1 second. I just go to the place where we stopped last week. Um,
Okay.
okay, so we stopped last week in chapter 5 towards the end. Um, and here, right, we're in the middle of all the guilt offerings, okay? And so that's, we're continuing in verse 20, all right? So we have here a distinction, which is really very interesting, a distinction between the Hebrew, where the word for theft is gezel, all right? Let me just mark that. And another word, which is geneva, which is
Steel.
right, which is also another word for, I don't know if we have it here, but there's a distinction between the two. We may come across that, but right now, there, even though the rabbis distinguish between these two words, um, it's pretty much clear from the context that the word gezel is the idea of fraud, right? Um, so fraud, and fraud to a certain degree is theft if we think about it, right? Um, so let's start by seeing this, all right? So let's start. Susan Gross, you want to start reading? God spoke to Moses.
Yeah, where oh I see. Okay. God spoke to Moses saying, when a person sins and commits a trespass against God by dealing deceitfully with another in the matter of a deposit or a pledge or through robbery or by defrauding another or by finding something lost and lying about it. If one swears falsely regarding any one of the various things that someone may do and sin thereby, when one has thus sinned and realizing guilt would restore either that which was gotten through robbery or fraud, or the entrusted deposit, or uh, the lost thing that was found, or anything else about which one swore falsely, that person shall repay the principal amount and add a fifth part to it. Could you give me a little more words?
Okay, so let's actually stop right now because that
Okay.
talk about a run-on sentence and
Yeah, I couldn't breathe.
right, you couldn't read. If we look, and by the way, if you look at it's divided. So if you look at Walter, right? Let me just take off the blue. We don't read it right now. That's my own marker for no color. Okay. Um, if you look at Alter, we're covering quite a few. Quite a few. Whoops. 1 second. Let me get rid of the color. And Adonai refuses to change his color. Let me try again. Okay, there we go. um, so, um, so notice that that's actually under. It's from 2020 to 24, right? Um,
Yeah.
so that's quite a bit, Okay. Um, so um, so we don't really care right now about the payment. But what is all this stuff here? What do we have here? Look at all these different ways of um, sinning, and notice who is a sin against?
God,
Against God. But in reality, who is a sin against?
other people.
Other
Other
people.
people, yeah.
So in other words, the idea that when you sin against other people, you are sinning against God.
Right. It's a serious thing.
Right? In other words, so theft is not something to be taken lightly. Now, what are all of these things here? Right? But we could look at no one really talks about what the things are. Right? They're more interested in the result. But look at all these things. Um, you have a deposit or a pledge. What's so terrible about that? If you lie about some deposit or a pledge, what could that mean? Think about today.
Well, you're giving your word. If you pledge something, you're committing yourself to doing something.
Okay, do it. This reminds me when I think I might have told you this once when I was. This was in an Orthodox synagogue where I grew up, and at the age of 12, I had to leave the junior congregation, and I had to move up to the adults. So they would put us, the girls, because we were right. So the girls, we were sitting upstairs, and they would put us to work. We were like usherettes. They called us usherettes. And
I did that in high school. Yeah.
this was in the synagogue. Okay, so now what? On the high holidays, there would be pledges on the seats for the UJA,
Right.
and you would put, you can't write anything, so you would press it down and you would make a pledge, right?
Right.
Now, a lot of people didn't show up to the synagogue, so what did we do for fun? The usherettes, we would press down all sorts of sums on the cards.
Oh, wow.
Okay, looking back, that was a terrible thing to do, right?
Yeah, because they were counting. They were going to count on those pledges.
Exactly. So, in other words, if you're building on pledges and then people don't come through with them, that's a problem. Or if you're, let's say, in synagogues where they announce the sums, right? Some synagogues are mounted, especially, let's say, you pledge $50,000 or something, so they announce that, and then you fall through on that. It's a form of cheating, So all of these things are very interesting. Or you find something lost, right? And you don't, all of these things are really fascinating. That they and the whole list here, right? So and it's a form of theft, right? All of these things are forms of theft. And if you do that, right, you have to pay back whatever you stole, right, and add a fifth. In other words, you have to give back money to a fifth to whatever it was worth. Okay, so what is that?
I have a question. Suppose you made that pledge, let's say $10,000 for the building fund, and the day after you lose your job. Are you still committed to make that 10,000?
Theoretically, yes, right? But you could call up the office and tell them, you could tell them, listen, I'm terribly sorry, but, when I made the pledge, I still had work, right? I can't do that anymore, right? The problem is if they hand all of those things into the UJA, right, or whatever the organization they're collecting for. In our synagogue, it usually was the UJA. That was the big appeal was on. Is it still that way today on the high holidays?
Nope, it's for the synagogue in our shul anyway.
Yeah,
Building
we do
fund.
it too.
It's
We
for the
don't
building
announce
fund,
them
right?
from the Bima though.
It used to be
That's
for
the
Israel
card.
bonds.
Or
Yeah.
Israel bonds or something like that.
Yeah, we've done Israel bonds in the past, but the last few years it's been for the synagogue.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, whatever, whatever it is. But the point is, people count on that. So you presumably, Jerry Lynn, you could, tell whoever, and back out. In other words, I don't think you could be sued for it. All right. I don't think you would be sued for it. But it is a serious pledge. Okay. So, and it's expensive. In other words, they could theoretically, if you follow the biblical law, right? If you follow the biblical law, then you have to. It could be expensive. Let's say you pledged $10,000, and you theoretically have to give back the 10,000 or whatever. Whatever you found. I don't want to go into details because I'm not sure exactly how this would work today or how it worked then. But you shall pay it to its owner upon realizing guilt. Okay. And then, go on, Susan, then that person
shall bring the priest as a penalty a ram without blemish from the flock or the equivalent oh boy, as guilt offering. The priest shall make expiation before God on behalf of that person, who shall be forgiven for whatever was done to draw blame thereby.
Okay, so in other
Pretty
words,
hard to understand.
okay, well, what do you think it means? I mean, I could look at the Hebrew. He brings the guilt offering, all right? In other words, remember, we're talking about offerings to God. He brings a guilt offering to the
But it
priest.
has to be a quality guilt offering. In other words,
Exactly.
it has to
Right,
be a perfect one, not
right,
just
right.
a
Without
bit here and
blemish.
there.
Right,
Right,
without blemish.
without blemish.
This is when his guilt is confirmed. In other words, when
Right.
his guilt is confirmed, the Hebrew is um, I love the Shakir. B'shilem, la'asher, right? La'asher lo yitnenu. Actually, the Hebrew is pretty hard to understand also. Let's see, how does he translate it here? Or he should pay back the principal when his guilt is confirmed. They both say the same thing, more or less, right? When his guilt is confirmed.
But what confirmed by whom? Does he say that he's guilty, or originally, or somebody says you did it?
Well, it says when he's found guilty. Let's see, 23.
So it seems like somebody finds him guilty.
Yeah, he's found to be guilty. Yeah, I'm just looking here. Walter says many interpretations understand is guilty to mean acknowledges his guilt, right? In other words, he is found guilty, after which he acknowledges his guilt. Think BB today without, I forget where.
He doesn't acknowledge his
They're
guilt.
recording, so let's not go into that, but just think BB, who's not, who's not, if he doesn't, if he's, what's the word? If he is let off the hook, if he's pardoned, right?
Right.
No, he has to acknowledge his guilt.
Well,
You can't be pardoned without acknowledging guilt.
well, we don't know. It's very complicated. What if he doesn't acknowledge his guilt and is pardoned? Okay, so that's
It's not a
really
real
very,
pardon.
very interesting here. Okay, let's not go into that too much. Although I'm more concerned with America's big brother watching us than Israel. Okay. So
We're not there.
and then Biyom
Ah,
Ashmato, right? Biyom Ashmato, on the day of his, right? On the day of his guilt, right? Presumably on the day that he is found guilty, I would imagine is what that means, right? So when his guilt is confirmed. Okay. All right. Any other comments before we go on? So this is the end of that particular chapter, and now we're going up to chapter 6. Any comments before we go to chapter 6? Okay, now here we have a lot of commentary by Alter, which is very interesting, all right?
Well,
And in chapter 6. And this is also the beginning of a new parasha, all right? If you see the word here, tzav, this is a parasha of tzav, all right? Which means command or charge from the word tziva. Like, we say when we, Litzavot or mitzvah, right? Mitzvah is a commandment, all right? That's the word tzav. So command or charge, all right? God says to Moses, charge Aaron, all right? And then he goes on and he says a very interesting thing. Let's look at the commentary. He says, Zot Torah Ta'olah. This is the ritual of the Olah, all right? We're going to have to talk about each word here because the word for Olah, all right? The word for the Olah, you'll see here is the word
down there, yeah.
Is
burnt offering.
It's a burnt offering, but it's also very often translated holocaust. We no longer use, if you look at old Bible, old biblical, if you look at old biblical translations, they use the word holocaust, because what is a holocaust? It's a burnt.
upheaval.
It's burning going up, right? That's exactly what a holocaust is, right? But because of the, of our connection with the word holocaust today, all of them will say burnt offering, right? And olah means to go up. Okay. So when we start out by saying, notice each one has a different translation. This is the ritual of the burnt offering. And here it says, this is the teaching of the burnt offering. And the Hebrew is Zot Torat, right? We all know the word Torah, right? So Torah is not exactly ritual, but in this context, JPS understands it as a ritual, but it's actually is really, Torah means to teach. Like, how do you say a teacher in Hebrew?
Mora.
Right, exactly. Okay, so
Okay, so
Louise, would you like to read what it says here? This is the teaching.
Yep. This is the teaching. Leviticus repeatedly introduces a particular set of regulations with the phrase, this is the teaching, Torah. This being the first occurrence. Teaching is, in fact, the primary meaning of Torah, and this translation preserves that sense throughout, though in these contexts, procedure, ritual, regulation, and similar terms used in sundry modern English versions are all justified. In any case, the reiteration of the term is a strong verbal symptom of how Leviticus differs formally from other biblical books. This is primarily a book of instructions, and one of its Hebrew names, Torat Kohanim, could aptly be translated as priestly instructions.
Okay, so this is the first time we're coming across this term, okay? And that's why it's important to read it. And he has very extensive notes here. And anybody want to comment on that? I mean, so he's not criticizing JPS for their translation. He's simply saying that it's important for us to notice that, that these are teachings, right? That we can have teachings, and that's really what one could argue, that this whole book, most of the book, not all of it, is a manual. It's a manual of teachings, right? You buy a new, I don't know, coffee pot, and you get today you buy anything new, and all the instructions are in about 10 languages. So Chinese and whatever.
Or they're online. You get no instruction.
Yeah.
Right, or they're online, exactly, or they're online. So so this is the equivalent of that. Okay. Louise, would you like to continue? Just start reading a little bit.
Sure. It is the very burnt offering. The semantic force.
Here, we'll come back to that.
Oh, okay.
okay.
Over there. Okay. God spoke to Moses, saying, command Aaron and his sons thus. This is the ritual of the burnt offering. The burnt offering itself shall remain where it is burned upon the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar is kept going on it. The priest shall dress in linen raiment with linen breeches next to his body, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar and place them beside the altar. He shall then take off his vestments and put on other vestments and carry the ashes outside the camp to a pure place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning, not to go out. Every morning the priest shall feed wood to it, lay out the burnt offering on it, and turn into smoke the fat parts of the offerings of well-being. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out.
Okay, so this we really have a lot of new information here, right? By the way, it says here, Aish Tamid, we're used to seeing Ner Tamid, but we have here a, so in other words, we have a situation, by the way, here, this is like clearly, if you see the Samach here, it means we have the ending of a particular, section, okay? So, first of all, there are lots of interesting things here. In other words, first of all, that the burnt offering has the light of it, or the fire, has to be there all the time. Why?
to make sure it's completely burnt off.
Okay, but why? Why do you think?
To get the oil, maybe that's coming out of the burnt offering.
What it means is, this is almost like it's almost like, I'm trying to think why it should be there.
Like a pilot light? It's like the pilot light on a stove?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Good
Which
idea.
means very nice idea. Right. So if you think
Maybe
about it,
because if it's the Sabbath, you can't light the fire and you have to have it burning.
okay, all right. We have all sorts of interesting suggestions
Yeah.
that you're making, right? Now, why should it be burning, you know, forever, right? And you know, why have a pilot light? Why have a light on, even the Ner Tamid in the synagogue, right? Which is different. But why have it on always?
Mm.
Well, because if it stops, then the composition of it changes.
Okay, what does
I
that
mean,
mean?
it would harden or it would be different than it was at the beginning and follow that process all the way through.
Okay,
And it also keeps the altar hot in case
Mhm.
they need it, instead of starting out ice cold and
okay,
then having to start from the beginning.
I mean,
okay,
to start a new fire is a lot of work.
okay. So all of your suggestions are very good. I was thinking to myself, in terms of, you know, like a medical procedure that you have to have the machines always ready and in wait,
Right.
right?
Mm.
Something like that, or um, or maybe if, you know, if somebody really has to bring an offering, an emergency offering, whatever that means, right?
Right.
Um, and that it's always there, it's always ready. It's very interesting. And the question is, can you bring an offering on Shabbat? It would seem that you could, which might mean that you would have to keep it burning all the time. So let's see,
Right.
first of all, what they say about the word burnt offering, which is Zot Torah Ta'olah. This is the Torah, the teaching about the Olah, right? And then it says, He Ha'olah, right? It is the very burnt offering, right? Which is, the word is Mogza al HaMezbeach. How do they translate that here? Burnt, burnt,
Burned upon.
burnt. All right, but here, um, um, Moked, when we say Moked today, what do we mean by Moked? In modern Hebrew,
A place.
a place, exactly. In other words, so this is the Olah on the place, all right? On the place, so in other words, it's in a very specific place, all right? And he's translating it here as hearth.
Yeah,
I
it's a
like
good
that
translation.
translation.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You remember the song, Keep the Home Fires Burning?
Right.
Yeah.
What's the idea of keep the home fires burning?
Right.
Welcoming, welcome.
Right. The word hearth means what? Now he say, by the way, he doesn't agree with that translation, but I like it. I actually like the word hearth, because hearth, when you talk about hearth, what does that mean?
Fireplace.
I picture a
Where?
fireplace. Yeah.
Mhm.
In old homes, what's the fire?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking you, what's
Usually
the
the living room, isn't it?
It's the living room.
Yeah.
It's you all gather around, right?
Yeah.
Different heat and maybe cooking, making marshmallows, right? I mean, you know, whatever. But the point is, you know, it's the place. And the word hearth, right? The word hearth really means that, right? And sometimes people even play around with the word hearth and heart, right? It's the center of the, so he says the literal sense, right? He says a literal sense is place of burning, though the translation hearth proposed by some modern scholars sounds altogether too domestic for a cultic setting. But I don't agree with that. I think it's a great translation, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Stylistically, this entire passage about the burnt offering is dominated by terms related to burning as if to focus the idea of a sacred fire that burns perpetually, coordinated with the sacrificial fire that entirely consumes the birth world, right? And now we come to the word olah, okay? Rachel, you want to read that? The word for burnt offering or holocaust, you want to read that?
Sure. The word for burnt offering or a holocaust, olah, is not derived from a root that means to burn, but rather from the verb to go up, which, however, is metonymically linked to burning by suggesting the idea that the whole sacrifice goes up in smoke. Fire and blood are the two substances that are the key to the sacrificial rites, but the present passage gives preeminence to the nexus between cult and fire, the element associated with God's fiery epiphany at Sinai and with his first appearance to Moses in the burning bush, hence an altar with a fire that shall not go out. Also, the olah is the only one that the priests don't get a hunk to eat, right?
Right, because we all burned up, right. So this whole idea of the burning bush, right? Burning bush,
Yeah.
and the Sinai, okay? So God is associated with fire. It was a very interesting article. I just actually, I was going through some of my correspondence today with somebody, and I came across my take on the guy's article, which was that God is very often associated with fire, right? And not only fire, but when he's angry, the fire, those of you who've studied with me in the past, when God is angry, the fire comes out of his
mouth.
Out of his nostrils, right?
Right.
Out of it, like the dragon. So this whole idea of God being associated with fire, one can say, argue both positively and negatively, but here the idea of fire going up, and then what we've come across, the idea that God smells, right? The anthropomorphic idea that God smells the good smell of what's being burned. So, okay, that's one thing. Now, the other thing that's interesting, there's no commentary on here, but notice is that after he takes the ashes, right? The ashes presumably now are pure, right? There's no blood or anything. He takes the ashes and brings the ashes to a pure place. Now, when he does that, he takes off his presumably bloody butcher clothes, and he puts on clean clothes. Okay, so this is so this whole idea of and then they have to make sure that it never goes out. It's fascinating.
Also,
Okay.
it was kind of fascinating when they're putting a fire on the altar that the last heap burned within him. And this prompted the comment that the fire on the altar must be paralleled by a fire in the heart of the officiating priest, whose enthusiasm for the sacred nature of the work must never be lost.
Okay, where are you reading from, Jolynn?
The Etz Chaim.
The Eitz Chaim. Very nice. Okay, very nice. Good. Okay. I by the way, I'm not trying to downplay, JPS, and Eitz Chaim uses JPS. I'm not trying to downplay it, but I actually, most of us know the JPS commentary. So but feel free whenever you want to read something from JPS, because I think it's a wonderful commentary. And most of us have that in the synagogue, and you could read it. Okay, so now we have another Torah.
I had something. This is something very, to me. Every time they have to put on nice clothes, they're always linen.
Right.
Now, I don't know how you picture these nice clothes, but to me, the white, the linen is always white or just cream colored. It doesn't even make sense, but I have a picture of their vestments, and light linen.
Right. Okay. So let me stop sharing for a second. Let me go into. I have shown the pictures in my other group very often when we looked at the priests. Let me share the screen with you. Share screen. Um, share screen. Let's go to priestly.
Vestments.
Priestly.
It just seems it should be white if it's going to be holy.
Okay. Yes.
I'm picturing them with like gold braid. I don't know.
You got
Well,
fancy. I was plain.
oh wait. Oh, oh my gosh, they're showing other priests, not our priests.
Wrong priest. They wear black.
Oh,
Well, they certainly seem to have a lot of clothes.
right, in Leviticus. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that one. Yeah, here. This is a picture I usually use. Yeah.
Ah, right.
That's not it.
Right.
Nah.
No, because it has a lot of description, right? It has a lot. There's a turban, right? There's
Right.
the underwear is white, presumably, right?
Yeah.
But and by the way, they do have to have undergarments. By the way, I've pointed that out many times. In other words, because it has to be from linen, all right, covering the naked flesh from the hips to the thighs, so the high priest doesn't bear guilt in the holy place. Because if his, parts would be shown, that would be disrespectful to God, right? So he has on right. So he has. So these are all of the in great detail, right? And this is what the priests,
Well, I guess I undressed him to the undergarments because that's the only way.
Okay. Okay, so let's go back to sharing again. Share. Okay. So where are we? Okay, so now we have the meal offering. All right. So Torah Mincha. All right. So we have the meal offering. Susan Ferris, would you like to read? I see you're reading. No? Okay.
Yeah, you know what? I had it turned around so it was bigger, but now it's little again. Hold on, now I can't see it at all. Okay, I guess I'm good. And this is the ritual. Is that where I'm starting? Of the meal offering? Okay. And this is the ritual of the meal offering. Aaron's sons shall present it before Adonai in front of the altar. A handful of the choice flour and oil of the meal offering shall be taken from it, with all the frankincense that is on the meal offering, and this token portion shall be turned into smoke on the altar as a pleasing odor to Adonai. What is left of it shall be eaten by Aaron and his sons. It shall be eaten as unleavened cakes in the sacred precinct. They shall eat it in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. It shall not be baked with leaven. I have given it as a portion from my offerings by fire, that it is most holy, like the sin offering and the guilt offering. Only the males among Aaron's descendants may eat of it, as then.
As
their due for all time, throughout the ages, from Adonai's offerings by fire. Anything that touches them shall become holy.
Okay. So what do we have here? We have some very interesting things here. First of all, the fact is that who eats it?
Aaron and his sons.
Aaron and his sons.
What's left of it, right? What's left of it, all right? But we also have the word mincha. This is what they call the meal offering, the grain offering or the meal offering, right? In Hebrew, it is the mincha, right? And And mincha is also today. What is mincha?
Service.
Service in the afternoon.
Afternoon service.
An afternoon service, exactly. Is
Right.
there a connection between the two? I don't know, but that's very interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
TORAH mincha, and it specifically is a grain offering or meal. Right, by meal, the Hebrew is, as I said, is mincha. All right, and who eats it? Because in the tribe of Levi, right? If they don't have, who's giving them food, right? The tribe of Levi doesn't have land, remember?
Right. Yeah, the people have to
Oh.
feed them.
The people have to feed them. So in other words, if somebody has to make sure that they are kept with food, right? So in other words, they have to be kept with food regularly, right? Now, what's really interesting, and also for some reason, it has to be unleavened. Why exactly? I'm not sure. We talked about this last time when we came across the unleavened flat cakes, which you said basically is
Matzah.
matzot, exactly. That's exactly what it is, right? You're exactly
Right.
matzot, all right? And maybe it's so that, we don't have to worry in the future about, well, maybe they have gluten problems also, but no, I'm joking. But no, but seriously speaking, maybe you want to make sure that the altar will always be in a situation where there's nothing leavened on it, right? And we discussed this last time. So when you come to Pesach, you don't have to, do anything.
Kosher.
You don't have to kosher it exactly, right? And it has to be eaten. Has to be eaten in the whole. You don't take the food outside, right? You have to eat it there. In other words, it's like you go to a kiddush, right? I'm sure you all see people who take food home with them. That put them in their pockets or something, or take a little kiddush. Well, you're not supposed to do that.
No.
Kiddush, you're supposed to eat the food at the kiddush. You're not supposed to
Right.
take it. So,
Bad manners.
right. So, but it's funny. My father, when we were little, my father used to bring home things from the kiddush for us. We didn't go to the synagogue, and he would bring things home. And one day he didn't bring things home, and we said, "How come you didn't bring us anything home?" So he said, "Well, you want to go to the synagogue? You go to the synagogue, and then you'll get your food there. You can't, And so he stopped bringing things home, and we started going to the synagogue. But it's just really funny because, okay, anyway, whatever. So the idea that it is in verse 10, it is the Kodesh Kadashim, right? In other words, the idea in that the it is equivalent, right? It is holy of holies. It is the equivalent in Hebrew, Kodesh Kodashim. It's equivalent to the previous offerings that we saw, the guilt offering and the offense offering. In other words, so don't say that mincha, because it's grain, is less valuable than the goats or the rams or whatever. Okay? In other words, it's just as valid a form of sacrifice. Any comments on that? I think that's important.
I just have a comment, which is that all of these things are only eaten by the high priest and his sons. So I was wondering what the women eat.
Good question. Yes, that's a very interesting question. In general, later on we'll come across things where we're told on the restrictions of people who can eat the food. And we're told specifically that women and wives can eat of it, but if the woman marries out of the tribe, she's no longer entitled to eat from the food. In other words, there's presumably, even though it says Kal Zachar very clearly, right? It says that clearly. Presumably, why later interpretations, however, I think what we're going to do is, I think after this, we're going to go in, we'll go into we'll go into Sfaria and see what they have to say about that. That's a very important comment, and I should have underlined it myself, okay? But before we come to that, let's just look at the idea of touching, all right? At the end, whoever touches, all right, whoever touches them shall be holy, all right? Now, what does that mean? How do we understand that? That's so strange. Anything or whatever, or whoever touches.
Does it say kadosh, that they'll become kadosh? Is that the word?
Yeah, yikdash. Yeah, the word is yikdash. Yeah. So you're not supposed to, you should not be touching them unless you are a member of the priestly caste, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Jacob Milgram, who's the great scholar on the book of Leviticus, says that the reference is to objects rather than persons. And so what we're talking about is more a contagion of holiness, right? In other words, that when you touch something that's that is holy, you become holy by touching something. We know that if you touch something that's impure, right, you can become impure. So in other words, if you have an object that comes in contact with a concentrated substance, such as the grain offering, you can no longer use it for profane purposes. Now, what does that mean? Let's take candlesticks, right?
Okay.
How many of you recall from your home, I grew up in an Orthodox home, that once you lit the candles, you cannot move them.
Yeah,
They have to stay where they are. You cannot move them.
Mm.
Why?
because they would be used for light.
They are now, you've blessed them and they are holy.
Mm-hmm.
If you move them, you are taking away from their holiness, and you should not be touching them at all. So, by the way, I remember my father. Now, since the women in our household lit the candles, it was not the custom for. I know a lot of people have daughters lighting the candles together with their mother. It was not the custom in our house. My mother lit the candles, and then my father, who had an extra little bit of time, he would move the candles so they would not be on the dining room table. But let's say you light the candles on the dining room table, they have to stay on the dining room table.
Wow.
You cannot move them. If you want to, we could check this out with AI, and we can double check that. But I also want to look at what Sfaria has to say about the Zachar. So what chapter are we in? We're in chapter 6, and we're going to go into Sfaria together. Just open Sfaria. We'll see what they have to say about that, because that's really very interesting how to see that. So let me share the screen with you again. I assume you've all been with me already when we've gone into Sfaria. Going into and then I'll switch to English in a minute. What chapter are we in? 6, right?
6.
Right.
Okay. I'll go in now to the English. Actually, I can go into both of them. So we have, I'll put them side by side. So we have okay. And we're at the end, right? We're not at the end, but we're looking for the males. Okay, here we go. So let's see what Rashi has to say. Okay. Norman, would you like to read this?
Sure. All the males among the children of Aaron shall eat of it. All the males, even one with a bodily blemish. But why is this stated at all? If you say, for the purpose of permitting the eating of the meal offering to such a priest, then it is redundant, for you see, this has already been stated. He, the priest with a blemish, may eat of the bread of his God, both of the most holy and of the holy. But it is intended to include the priest with bodily blemishes in the right of apportionment alluded to in the preceding verse. I have given it to them as their portion, i.e., that they may not only eat holy food of such as given to them by their fellow priests, but they are entitled to participate in the apportionment.
Okay, let's see. Okay, that does not solve the problem of women. Let's see what other people have to say. Hopefully, we'll have some comments in English as well. No, this doesn't help us. Let's see what, I'm not sure if he,
On the other side, it does. It says only the males among Aaron's descendants may eat of it, as their due for all time throughout the ages, from God's offering by fire. Anything that touches these shall become holy.
but we're not solving the problem of the women.
But that's not all that they eat.
Only the males solves the problem with the women.
Right. In other words, it doesn't say, it doesn't,
It says only.
it says here in this Birkat Asher on Torah, it does say here, Beitav, the patriarchal house. All right. Maybe he's trying to say that does include women. I don't know. But let's see if there's any other commentaries here. I'm just looking at the Hebrew right now. It had to be not saying any male, anything. No, it doesn't. No. Okay. Let's see. Anyone else?
So one commentator did see that there was a problem for the woman.
Where do you see it?
No, the one that you read, where
right,
he changed it to the house of.
Right, to the house of, right. Does anyone have the feminist one in front of you? I could open up mine and see what it says there. Okay, so that's really, I have the feminist one in front of it. Let me see what they have to say here. Leviticus, let's see what they have to say. Leviticus, what chapter are we in? 6?
6, yeah.
6, what verse?
Oh, we started around 20 or 21.
Let's see. I'll share the screen again with you. Let's share the screen. Share.
11.
11?
Only the males.
Okay, that's
Oh,
11.
we started in 5, right?
Okay, this is what they say in the Fed. We're talking about, this, right? The only the males. The translation here restricts eating of this sacrifice to Aaron and his sons. However, if one construes the Hebrew words as every male or all males, which is how the same translation understands the phrase in 24 out of 27 cases, right? The statement would permit all priests, not only the officiating priest, to partake of the offering. The purpose of the instruction may be to clarify that priests who are otherwise disqualified from officiating in the sacrificial ritual may nonetheless eat of these portions. Okay, they do not solve the problem. Okay, it's very interesting. They don't have anything to say here about that. You'd think that they would.
Strange, yeah.
So right? But they are leaning. But they are leaning on the other. They are leaning on what we saw before. That that's very interesting.
But if you
Let's see.
go
There's
to chapter 10, verse 14, it talks about, but you and your sons and daughters may eat the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the upraised.
Oh, jeez, you a
okay.
pain.
I have 1 second. I have another commentary here. This is a commentary. Those of you who have the feminist thing in front of you, it's on page 608. And it's by, actually, I know the commentator, Hilary Lipka, very young woman, I mean, young relative to me, up and coming Bible scholar. So she writes, it's called Another View. Most likely, Leviticus 6:11 specifies that only the males, right, may eat of certain sacrifices rather than every male. Why can, this is Rachel's question, why can the females in Aaron's line not partake of these offerings? What determines which priestly portions are restricted to the sons of Aaron and which may be shared by his daughters as well? The answer lies in the degree of holiness of the offering. The biblical text distinguishes between sacrifices considered to be most sacred, Kodesh Kodashim, okay, that's what we had here, right? I think, yes, right? Kodesh Kodashim. Am I sharing with you right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The biblical text distinguishes Kodesh Kodashim and those considered to be sacred, just simply Kodesh, right? They fall under the rubric of most sacred, right? Okay, the three most sacred offerings are considered most holy, right? So in other words, in order to partake of them or touch them, you have to be made holy. Women cannot be made holy. That's why only Aaron and his sons can eat them, okay? That's the reason. Okay, so women can eat other things, but not those. They cannot eat the Kodesh Kodashim.
Well, it's not good anyway because it's flat cakes.
Okay.
Who cares?
Right. The other ones, like the sacrifice of well-being and the first fruit, right? These offerings can be assumed by all members of the priestly family, including both the sons and the daughters, right?
See?
As long as they're not in a state of ritual impurity. In other words, if you're menstruating, you can't eat from them. Okay.
What about if you're pregnant?
Pregnant is not, that's not,
What
that's,
is?
that's not impure. You're not pure. In
You're
fact,
not impure?
a lot of women like to remain pregnant all the time, so they never have to get their periods.
I don't think so.
Well, think about it. I'm thinking of my grandmother who had 9 children, right?
So did mine.
A lot of our grandparents had lots of children, right? So the daughters, as I mentioned earlier, the daughters of a priest may eat of the portion only when she's a member of a priesthood. So in other words, as I said earlier, if she marries a layman, she can't eat them, all right? But if she's widowed or divorced and doesn't have children, she goes back to her father's household and she can again eat from the holy portions, okay? So this is, Rachel, thank you very much for your question. Right? We
Thank
learned a
you.
lot.
Thank you so much for finding the answer.
Maybe you got more than you wanted in terms of answers, but okay. Any other comments that we have? So next week I'm not going to start a new unit now. Next week we'll continue from this. We got to the end of the just the whole idea of contagion, right? The contagion, which I think is really interesting. And I mentioned that let me just mark off here where we stopped. Blue, so I don't forget. If you remember, at the very beginning, I talked a lot about what's the name? Purity and Danger. Purity and Danger by, why can't I think of the name right now? It doesn't really matter. Anyway, the whole idea of purity and danger is something that comes up all the time, which is that Mary Douglas, thank you, Mary Douglas, purity and danger. The whole idea of purity as being something which can, this is a new idea that purity can be passed on. Danger, we know, right? Impurity, we're more aware of. But purity, that's really interesting. That's something, it's like, you go to the altar, which is the sanctuary, and you hold on to the karnot hamizbeach, the horns, right? The horns of the sanctuary, of the altar. And then you get sanctuary, and it's considered to be a holy place, and no one can, take you from there, right? So this whole idea of the contagion of something pure that protects you is really very interesting. And the opposite of purity is not necessarily impure, but danger, that you're in a state where you're eligible for harm if you're impure. Anyway, it's a very interesting concept. And her book is a fascinating book. If you're, we could probably ask AI to summarize the book in 25 words. Should we do that? It's not nice to her, but we could do that. We could ask AI, and let's do that. Google, there's ChatGPT. I'll share it with you, and then we'll stop. We're a little bit over time, but nothing will happen. And if you have to leave, I understand. Summarize Mary Douglas's book.
You want a whole book?
Purity and Danger in 100 words. Okay. Let's see what they do.
Here it comes.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Rachel, you want to read?
Mary Douglas's Purity and Danger argues that ideas of purity, pollution, and taboo are central to how societies create and maintain order. She shows that dirt is not an objective substance, but matter out of place, a cultural judgment about what threatens social boundaries. By examining rituals, classifications, and prohibitions across cultures, Douglas reveals how concepts of pollution express deeper anxieties about disorder and ambiguity. The book challenges Western assumptions about rationality and primitive thought, demonstrating that all societies use symbolic systems to protect their structures and make sense of the world. Wow.
Okay. That last sentence appealed to me. But what is important is the whole idea of pollution, right? Disorder and ambiguity. So the sacredness, right? The sacredness is something. You also have a sacrifice, which is called related to the word shalom, right? In other words, so you have a sacrifice that is whole, right? Wholeness, and the whole idea that the opposite of wholeness, the opposite of something which is pure, is something which is, I would almost say, liminal, right? It's something that it is between like life and death. In other words, when you're in a situation where it's not clear where you are, it's very threatening, right? So a liminal situation, let's say when someone's dying and he hasn't quite died yet, or he hasn't, he's still living, and you're in this state where, and that's very challenging to us. We have a lot of problems with it. It was a very important book. And as I told you, when it came out I forget when, everyone started reading it, and everyone started really relating to the book. And I remember, I think I was still in college when it came out. So, Okay. Anyway, so see you people next week. Let me stop the. I hope this time works for everybody.